Hey everybody, welcome to video number 2 in this Python 101 course. Now, always one of the first things you kind of want to really understand when it comes to programming is variables. Okay, the idea of variables and data types. Okay, so the idea is that every programming language has a way to store information. Okay, by declaring what's called a variable, and every variable can have a name. Okay, so the simplest way to create a variable is you just give it a name. So we'll just call it like my underscore. Generally, if you have different multiple words in the variable name, usually you will, in Python, you'll use what's called snake case, where you use where you use these underscores to separate the different words. So my var for my variable. That's it. You just give it a name, and then you use the equal sign. The equal sign, it means assignment. You're saying, hey, whatever is after the equal sign, I'm going to save it or store it inside this variable. And you could use spaces, so we could do like my var equals, and then on the other side of the equal sign is either a thing or an expression. And an expression is something like first a thing. Okay, so I could say like the number 1. Okay, so I'm saying, hey, my variable equals the number 1. So I'm going to store the value of 1 in my variable. Okay, and then again, I can print the value of the variable. So I can pass the variable to print, and now I can actually like run it. So if I run the code python intro.py, see, it prints out 1. Okay, but I could also say that my var equals an expression. An expression would be something that has to be evaluated before the assignment occurs. So if I say 1 plus 1, this, I'm not going to save 1 plus 1 in my var. I'm going to save the result of 1 plus 1 in my var. Okay, so my var is going to, so what's going to happen is that this expression will be evaluated first. The result of the expression is 2, so then 2 is stored in my var. And again, I can prove that by printing the results. So if I do that, cool. Now watch what happens if I do 1 plus, okay, 1 in quotation marks, because these are two different types of data types. Okay, this is what's known as an integer. Okay, an integer is a whole number. Okay, keep it simple, it's just a whole number. And this is a string. Okay, string is basically treated as like words on a piece of paper. Okay, generally denoted by quotation marks. Now watch what happens. See, I get an error. Okay, and notice it uses this word type. Okay, types refer to different data types. Okay, and Python is what's called it's strongly typed. Okay, and what does it mean to be strongly typed? It means that you have to keep data consistent. Okay, so basically what happens is that there's no, Python is not, unlike JavaScript, it's not going to assume that it knows what I want when I try to add an integer, one data type, to another data type of string. It just doesn't know. It's not going to make any assumptions. Okay, so in that case, we need to make sure that they're consistent data types. So I could make them both strings. Okay, cool. And if I do that, I'm going to get 11. But it's not really 11. It's really the string of 1, 1. Okay, or I could get rid of the quotation marks on both, make them both numbers, and then I'll get 2, because now they're being treated as 2 numbers instead of 2 strings that are being concatenated. Either one works, okay? But the idea is you can't mix data types in Python. That's the main point. So you need to know the different data types. Like watch this. If I do 1.0, 1 plus 1.0, let's see what happens. I get 2.0, okay? In this situation, I was able to add 2 different numbers of 2 different data types, but notice it didn't print out 2, it printed out 2.0. Okay, because the minute I add an integer to, well, this would be referred to as a float because there's a floating point, so any kind of decimal number, it's going to come out a decimal number, okay, because there's a chance that it might be like some sort of fraction between 2 wholes. Okay, so there's going to be some room for like mixing types in this case. Okay, another type, so far we've seen 4 types, okay? And if you want to put comments in your code, comments are a good way for learning, especially in the early stages, because you can write notes to yourself in your code. What you do is you put a little hash. So what do we've learned? We have integers, which is like the number 1. We have like floats, which is like 1.0. We have strings, which are like hello. And the other big one I want to mention is booleans. Okay, booleans, the term boolean comes from the term boolean logic. Boolean logic means true or false. So there's potentially 2 possible values, true or false. And the thing to keep careful here is that in Python, you have to spell it with an uppercase T or F. This is not like JavaScript where true and false are lowercase true and lowercase false. So for example, if I were to take 1 and add true to it, let's see what it does. Does it throw me an error? No. Okay, it doesn't throw an error. Okay, now why? It's because true technically equals 1 and false is going to equal 0. Okay, just something to kind of be aware of. Okay, it's kind of, I imagine that behind the scenes it's really just an enum. And an enum, you don't know what that is yet, but like an enum is just basically you're saying like, hey, this thing always is really this. So true is really 1, but we're using true. So basically true or false. Okay, so those are your 4 main data types. Okay, and the cool thing is if you need to change one data type to another, you can do that. Okay, so for example, let me just print true. So if I were to print the value of true, watch what I get. I'm gonna print that and see if it prints true. But what if I want to like take a look at it as a number? I can use, I think it's like is it integer? It's been a while since I've done typecasting in Python. I think it might just be int. Was missing parentheses. Okay, and let's see if that does what I want. So let's run that code again. And yep, see that. So basically what this is, because it's of the type integer, it's going to take this value, boolean, and convert it into an integer. So it converts it to 1. Now let's see if I tried float. Okay, what does it turn it into? See, it turns it into 1.0. Now what if I try to turn it into a string, which I think is a str, if I remember right? str. And it still comes out of true, except now it's technically the string of true. Okay, so that's the deal there. Okay, so it's important to kind of appreciate that like different data falls into different categories and different types. I can save any type of data in a variable, but it's just kind of always important to know like, okay, what kind of data am I working with? Okay, that this is a integer and that this is a boolean. Cool. And then again, cool. And again, expressions can be all sorts of complicated. Okay, we can do all sorts of fun math expressions. So I can be like, let's just do like 5 plus 5 minus 5 divided by 5 multiplied by 5. Now keep in mind that when it evaluates this expression, PEMDAS, like you learned back in grade school, applies, which means first it's going to evaluate in parentheses. I don't see any parentheses. Then it'll evaluate any exponents. I don't see any exponents. We can add one. I can say 5. Okay, so this is really 5 to the 5th power. So that's going to get evaluated first because that be E, the PEMDAS. Okay, and again, if you're not familiar with that, it's PEMDAS. So parens, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So that's going to be the order that things are evaluated. So it's going to do this first. So it'll be like 5 times 5, which is 25. You know, it'll go so forth. After it does that, it would then do the 5 divided by 5, which would be 1. Okay, and then it would do the whatever 1 times whatever the result of 5 to the 5th exponent was. Okay, which will be the same thing. And then it would do 5 plus 5, which would be 10. And then it'll be 10 minus the result of all that. Okay, that'd be the way it gets evaluated, which can be kind of complicated, right? You're like, okay, how am I, like that's a lot to remember. But let's see what the result would have been. My var. Okay, and you get that's the number you get. But maybe that's not what you wanted. What you wanted was for this to happen first. You wanted to happen in the order that it's written in. Well, in that case, this is where you would use parentheses. So I'm going to say, hey, I want 5 plus 5 to happen first. Okay. Then I want this minus this to happen first. You know, and you would just kind of keep doing that. Okay. And I would technically do it in that exact order. Okay, the one way I always like to think about parentheses is that always the innermost parentheses gets evaluated first. Okay, so in this case, really the 5 plus 5 happens first, so it'll be 10, then 10 minus 5 happens, so this really ends up being 5. So 5 divided by 5 is going to end up being 1. So then 1 times 5 is going to be 5, and then it's going to be 5 to the 5th power. So this really just ends up being 5 to the 5th power. Okay, which ends up being 3125, and just to make sure, let me just do that in a calculator. 5 to the 5th power. Actually, that's not, we'll just do it the long way. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 3125. Okay, so that's exactly what we got. Okay, so cool. Okay, just to kind of understand like how math expressions work. Cool, and that's called a math expression. Why? Because you're working with numbers. Then there's like string expressions. Okay, so basically this is where you're working with strings. So let's see here. What happens if I do like, you know, cheese plus whiz? How does this get evaluated? Okay, so this is an expression, but it's a string expression because the types of data are strings. So I go boop, cheese whiz, yay. Now what happens if I did like multiply? I think I should get an error, but let's find out. Okay, yep, you get an error because it's like I don't know how to do that. I think you can do it with like an integer. I could do this like cheese times 4, and yeah, so it just multiplies it. Cheese, 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 cheese. Okay, and then let's see what happens if I try to divide it by 4. Again, a good thing in programming is always experiment, try things out, because you'd be surprised what results you get. Okay, yeah, that doesn't work either. Okay, and then what if I do cheese minus 4? That doesn't work either. Okay, so you can multiply with an integer, but those are kind of different string expressions where I can, this is called concatenation, where I'm adding multiple strings together. But another way you can kind of get the same result is something called interpolation. So let's say I created a variable with the word whiz. So we'll play whiz equals space whiz. I could do this. I use the F keyword, that means format, so it's going to format this string. Okay, and then what I do is I say, okay, cheese, and then anytime I want to use a variable, I use curly brackets, and I say, okay, hey, here in this piece of the string, I want you to use the variable whiz. Okay, because that F is what tells it to do that. So what's going to happen is that now this is going to end up being the same as before, cheese plus this string right here. Okay, except now this will be 2 spaces, but that's fine. Yeah, it's 2 spaces. Okay, because again, it's injecting this string. It's injecting this string where that variable, or I told it to put that variable. Okay. Cool, cheese whiz. So those are called string expressions. So the idea is that you're doing operations on strings. Then there's Boolean expressions. Okay, basically where you're essentially asking true or false. Okay. So for example, if I do 5 equals 5, I'm saying, hey, is 5 5? 5 is, are they the same thing? And the answer to this is true. So this is different. Again, 1 equal sign means store the thing in the variable. 2 equal signs means are these two things the same thing? So I'm saying is 5 the same thing as 5? and that's going to be true. So then the result of that expression, so the true is what gets stored in the variable. Okay, so if I run that, I should get true and true. Okay, nice. You can do, hey, I can say, are they not equal to each other? Okay, so this is the not operator, so not equal. If I run that, that should give me false. Okay, and then in Python, if you want to do multiples of these, you can do like and. So it's and, so it's like, is 5 and is 4 equal 4? Next, let me just change this to 5 equal 5. So the idea is that both of these have to be true. So right now, is 5 equal 5? Yes. 4 equal 4? Yes. So you have true and true. So, and both are true. So then this is all going to be true. So you get true. But what if I change one of these to be false? So 4 does still equal 4. It's still true. But 5 does not equal 5 is not true. That's false. So I'm going to get back false because the whole expression is false. Because it evaluates the whole expression. But if I change this to or, it's only one of them that has to be true. So in this case, I'm going to get true again because 4 equals 4 is still true. So those are Boolean expressions when we want to ask a question of our code. Okay, and generally, save that result in a variable. Okay, so basically, now you've seen the different types of data, the different types of expressions, ways we can work with those different types of data, and the fact that I could save those results in a variable. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoy that. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.